A 10-year-old raised in one home believes she can handle almost anything life throws at her. A 10-year-old raised just down the street flinches at the smallest mistake and assumes he is not good enough before he even tries. So what happened in those early years that made one child confident and the other constantly doubting themselves? And why do so many therapists say that damaged self-esteem, once it takes root in childhood, can quietly follow a person into every relationship, every job interview, and every decision for the rest of their life? What parents say and do every day, often without realizing it, shapes whether a child grows up believing they are capable or believing they are simply not enough. Some of these habits look completely normal, even common, in everyday households, passed down from one generation of parents to the next without much question. By the end of this video, you will understand the 10 most common ways parents unintentionally damage a child's self-esteem and why psychologists across the United States are seeing the effects of these patterns show up more and more in young adults who struggle with confidence, decision-making, and self-worth. Let us break down these 10 habits, starting with the one that causes damage earliest and often goes unnoticed the longest, precisely because it is so easy to mistake for ordinary encouragement. 1. Comparing them to other children. Saying things like, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" or "Your friend already knows how to do that" seems like harmless motivation. But child psychologists note that constant comparison teaches a child that their worth depends on measuring up to someone else rather than simply growing at their own pace. Over time, the child stops noticing their own progress and starts scanning the room for who is doing better, a habit that often continues well into adult relationships and careers, where it can quietly fuel jealousy, chronic comparison on social media, and a sense that they are always one step behind everyone else. 2. Criticizing who they are instead of what they did. There is a real difference between saying "that was a careless mistake" and saying "you are so careless." The first addresses behavior. The second attacks identity. Repeated identity-based criticism teaches a child to believe something is fundamentally wrong with them, rather than something they simply need to improve, and that belief tends to calcify quietly over years until it feels like an unchangeable fact about who they are, rather than one moment among thousands that could have gone differently. 3. Focusing only on failures, not effort. When a child brings home a good grade and a bad one, and the conversation only ever lands on the bad one, the child slowly learns that effort does not matter and that only perfect outcomes are worth acknowledging. This creates a fear of trying rather than a motivation to improve, and many children respond by avoiding challenges altogether rather than risking another conversation that only focuses on what went wrong. 4. Making love feel conditional. When affection and warmth clearly increase after success and cool off after failure, a child begins to believe they are only lovable when they perform well. Psychologists who study attachment describe this as one of the most damaging patterns for long-term self-worth, because it ties a person's value to achievement instead of to who they are, and that pattern can quietly shape every future relationship where they feel they must perform to be accepted, often leading to burnout, people-pleasing, or chronic overachievement driven by fear rather than genuine interest. 5. Never letting them make their own decisions. A child who is never allowed to choose their clothes, their hobbies, or even their opinions learns that their judgment cannot be trusted. Over time, this erodes confidence far more than any single failure ever could, because it removes the chance to prove to themselves that they can choose well, and it often leaves them second-guessing even simple decisions well into adulthood. 6. Dismissing or mocking their feelings. Responses like "you are too sensitive" or "stop being dramatic" teach a child that their emotional experience is wrong or embarrassing. Instead of learning to understand and regulate their feelings, they learn to hide them, which often shows up later as difficulty trusting their own emotional instincts, or as a tendency to apologize for having feelings at all, even in moments when those feelings are completely reasonable and deserve to be heard. 7. Using backhanded compliments. Phrases like, "You actually did well for once," or "I'm surprised you figured that out," combine praise with a subtle insult. Children are highly sensitive to this kind of mixed message, and over time, it teaches them to distrust praise altogether, always waiting for the insult hidden inside it. even in situations where the compliment is completely genuine. 8. Setting impossible standards. When nothing a child does is ever quite good enough, whether it is a grade, a performance, or a chore done around the house, they begin to internalize the belief that they themselves are simply not good enough, no matter how hard they try. This kind of moving target leaves children chasing an approval that never actually arrives, and eventually, many of them simply stop trying at all, deciding it is safer to expect disappointment than to keep reaching for a standard that always moves further away. 9. Shaming them in front of others. Correcting or criticizing a child publicly, in front of friends, siblings, or extended family, adds humiliation on top of the original mistake. Psychologists note that public shaming creates a fear of visibility and judgment that can follow a person well into adulthood, often showing up as social anxiety or an intense fear of making mistakes in front of others, sometimes leading them to avoid public speaking, group settings, or any situation where they might be watched and evaluated. 10. Withholding praise and affection. Some parents believe that praise will make a child arrogant, so they withhold it almost entirely, even when it is genuinely earned. Without regular honest acknowledgement, a child has no internal reference point for what they are actually good at, and often grows into an adult who cannot recognize or accept their own strengths, deflecting compliments, and downplaying real accomplishments, even in front of people who genuinely admire them, and sometimes struggling to advocate for themselves at work or in relationships as a result. None of these 10 patterns come from a desire to harm a child. Almost all of them come from a parent's own fears, their own upbringing, or a genuine, if misguided, attempt to build character through toughness. Many parents raising children this way were raised the exact same way themselves, and simply never questioned whether it actually worked. But self-esteem is not built through pressure and criticism. It is built through consistent acknowledgement, unconditional affection, and the freedom to make mistakes without losing a parent's love in the process. If you recognized a few of these patterns in your own childhood or your own parenting, there is no need to panic. Awareness is always the first step toward change, and small shifts made consistently over time can rewrite these patterns for the next generation. Praise effort as often as outcome. Separate the behavior from the person. Let your child make small decisions and live with the results. Keep your affection steady, no matter how the day went. And remember that the way you speak to your child in these early years often becomes the way they speak to themselves for the rest of their life, long after they have grown and moved out on their own. Which of these 10 patterns do you recognize from your own childhood or from your own home today? Share the number below. In the next video, we look at how to rebuild self-esteem in a child or in yourself after years of these patterns. Subscribe so you do not miss it.